All right, great. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, right? I apologize. I'm a little bit jet lagged because I landed here like a day and a half ago. So I'll do my best. So the point about this presentation, I was asked to talk a little bit about 500 startups, some lessons I think that hopefully will be helpful for you guys. But also, first I'm going to talk about a little bit about 500 startups. I'm going to talk a little bit about the trends of just general startup trends, which actually based on sort of why I think we've been relatively successful so far. And so let me jump into this. All right. So who I am. I'm a venture partner of 500 startups. I actually mentor at about 16 different startup accelerators for fun. I'm on the board or advisory board of about, I think it's like 8 companies, actually 9 companies now. And previous to this, I actually spent 10.5 years actually as an executive at Yahoo, a little startup out of Silicon Valley. And I actually worked as a commercial director there, running lots of different regions and businesses. And actually before Yahoo, I actually spent 2 years actually at an e-commerce startup. We raised about $60 million and actually proceeded to waste $60 million. This is back in 99, 2000. I'm going to raise this again, why this is important. And so 500 startups. We are actually a seed fund, have a little bit over $100 million under management. 34% of our investments are actually overseas. So we actually have an office in Southeast Asia, we have an office in Mexico, and we actually have partners who actually travel a lot to Brazil. And so we actually love international. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. And this guy below, that's Dave McClure. He's actually renowned for, he's part of the PayPal mafia. And so many of us actually come from the operating world. And so I come from the Yahoo Mafia. Many of us, one of our other founding partners actually comes from the Google Mafia. So most of us are all Silicon Valley denizens. And sorry, before I go back, we have about 780 investments, and we've been around for 4.5 years. I'm going to talk about our methodology afterwards as well, too. All right. And so why, the whole point is like, why does 500 startups exist? What makes us different? And truth of the matter is, a firm like us would never have existed even 5 years, 6 years ago. And what has changed in the startup world is these great big platforms. Remember I mentioned to you the startup I worked at previously in the late 90s and early 2000s. Half of that money that we raised was actually towards buying servers, and the cloud did not exist. A lot of these platforms, for example, marketing platforms, just didn't exist. And so you saw yesterday in my friend Paul's presentation, it's like, for the first time now, because of Google, you can reach like over 1 billion people just from advertising, example, right? You have like Amazon Web Services. You can actually rent a lot of these, software. A lot of these, you can rent a lot of hardware and stuff now. That completely changes the game, and because of that, the cost of doing a startup has dropped dramatically. So previously, where you had to raise millions just to get a prototype out, now you can raise 50,000, 100,000, hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get a working prototype. And so there's been huge changes here in the startup world. And I think the other piece, this is stolen from my friend Vitaly Galon's presentation, and actually taken from Steve Blank, is what has also happened is that a lot of people talk about like these massive exits of like WhatsApp, like 19 billion, like Beats by Dre. These are atypical. Most of the majority of the exits actually are in the $10 to $80 million range. So not only is it cheaper now to actually start a startup, the exits are also, generally speaking, within a smaller range now. So there's, and also what's happening is that typically, for the most part, at least in Silicon Valley in the US, to get to an exit usually takes between, in some cases, 3 to 5 years. I know it's more of a challenge in other places, but this is what we're seeing, is that the majority of exits are in very, very, sort of within a range of money. And this is good, because it's cheaper start, you can still make money with not these massive exits. All right. What is also different as well too is that there's been a big revolution in thinking. There's lots of methodologies now that are available, like Eric Ries's Lean Startup. I'm a big fan of Peter Sim's Little Bets, and this, and there's also Moneyball. Hopefully, you guys have all seen the movie of using quantification to actually to make these little bets, right? And so there's been a lot of changes and methodologies available now for startups that didn't exist before, and this is a big deal. And so this is actually how we came about, is that we talk about like little bets, right? I'm not going to, I'll share this presentation with all of you afterwards, but we look at certain things like is this a product that actually, is there a working product? And does it actually solve a real problem? Has to be, generally speaking, capital efficient, so less than $1 million in funding, and we care a lot about distribution. The assumption is your product works, right, and solving a real problem, but the next thing is actually, how are you getting this in the hands of your customers? And I go down the list, I'm not gonna go through all this, but that leads to our methodology of the 500 startups, little bets. Our average check size, which is why we're so different than a lot of VC firms. Most VC firms spend hundreds of thousands of dollars per investment. Nothing wrong with that, and that works, that model works. But what we do is we do a lot of $50,000 bets, and what that does is you make these small little bets because you don't have to spend as much money, you don't have to spend as much time and money on due diligence. You spend a little bit of due diligence, and what is also different for us, and because we have a very big network and community, most of the investments we make are already vetted by a lot of the people we know and trust. And so what happens is we make these small bets, and that earns us the right to actually see how they're doing. And then based on real data, we double down, when they're looking at raising the next round, or just if there's some opportunity, we actually invest a lot more as follow-on investments. In some cases, we invest only in the top 20 to 25% of performers. And because of this, as an example, our IRR for Fund 1 is like in 22.3%. For VC firms, that's very, very good for a fund that's only been around for 4.5 years. And our Fund 2, I think we're at 21.7% IRR. And as you can test, that's not bad, right, for VC. Most VC firms don't even return the capital. Most VC firms suck, all right, because it takes 10 years to see if you're actually doing well or not. And okay, truth of the matter, we've been around 4.5 years, so it seems to be going very well right now. But we'll know in about 4 or 5 years, so we'll have this conversation again in 4 years whether this continues or not. And so the philosophy of 500 startups, a lot of VC firms talk about being founder friendly and founders first, and a lot of it's not really true. We actually believe that. And so have you guys heard the story of so in the United States, there's this story that goes around Silicon Valley. And so as you know, in the United States, breakfast is usually bacon and eggs, right? And so what happens is the chicken goes to the pig and goes, hey, do you want to start a breakfast, do you want to start like a breakfast restaurant? And the pig goes back and goes, great, you're merely interested, I'm fully committed, right? Think about that. And this is the way we think about, we are the chicken, the investor is the chicken, and the startup founder, they're the pig, they're fully committed. It's our job to basically support them. And so that's actually the way, that's the philosophy of how 500 Startups is. And unfortunately, and this I'll go to the next point, is that the reason why we are non-traditional, and I'll get back to that point, we actually hire from non-traditional backgrounds. So I'm an operator, and so we talk a lot about operators as VCs, because I actually think my opinion, and actually my firm's opinion of why venture capital is broken, is because a lot of venture capitalists actually come from a financial background. They've never hired or fired anybody. They've never built any businesses. So it's very, very hard to be empathetic and to really, really help the founders. There's odd exceptions. There are a lot of exceptions. There's awesome VCs who have financial backgrounds. But for the most part, I actually think this has been one of the big changes. So if you look at a lot of the Valley VCs, the top tier VC firms, so this book by Ben Horowitz, from Andreessen Horowitz, this firm has been around for 5 years, I believe, and it's popped from nowhere to become one of the top VC firms around. And it's because all these guys have built businesses. And that's a huge, huge change. If you look at all the top tier VC firms, with Sequoia, look at Greylock, a lot of the staff are all ex-operators. So this is a massive change in this space. And this is actually, I think, something that Europe as a whole, and even New York, I'll be the first to say, a lot of these people come from financial background. Nothing necessarily wrong with that, but the whole point is like, how do you add value to your portfolio if you've never done any of this stuff before? And I've sat in board meetings with other VCs, and they're like, "Oh, we have a bad quarter." The founder's like, "I have a bad quarter," and the answer from the VC is like, "Sell more." And like, how is that helpful? It is not helpful because they've never done this before. Right, anyways, not ranting anymore. So we also believe a lot in diversity and international. We believe in actually arbitraging sort of undervalued assets. And in our view, it's international. Not enough time in money is actually paid attention to international investments. And we think by investing internationally and actually injecting expertise and actually trying to support them, we can actually help take them to the next level. The other thing that we also believe in is also diversity. We also think women are, and you think about this, right? Half the population is women. And what is bizarre, we have a lot of women partners on our team. What is bizarre when, I'll give you an example of e-commerce. Like, you know why a lot of like e-commerce companies have missed some of the best, a lot of the best VC firms actually miss some really, really good e-commerce companies because they're men. It's like, how do you add value, or how can you even find an opportunity if you don't buy women's clothing, right? As a basic example. And so we think that this is a really, really important thing that we focus a lot on, not just from hiring, but also funding companies. So international and diversity is really, really big for us. We also have an accelerator fund. We believe we're probably among the best. You know, there's a lot of other good sort of accelerators. But the reason we like the accelerator is because our accelerator program, we get close to 1,300 applications for 30 spots, so it's pretty selective. We spend 12 to 14 weeks with these companies helping them raise money, helping their business models, and we actually think like this is the future of a lot of accelerators. I think don't really add any value. We actually have gone from doing 2 accelerator programs a year to actually 4. So I actually run the accelerator actually in San Francisco. That's part of my job. And we think that this is the future of VC. This is actually the next logical step. So everything's coming together. You're starting to see a lot of accelerator funds actually, a lot of accelerators actually raise money doing sort of as value add VC. And you're starting to see a lot of VCs actually adding a lot of what we call like agency services to be a lot more hands-on. So that world is actually coming together. And so the other piece, what has been a big change, and I mentioned this earlier about distribution, we care a lot about distribution, sales and marketing. Like, my view is that I assume the product works, right? Generally speaking, I think there's awesome technologies out there, but I think there's too much of the cult of the engineer and cult of the product manager. I think product is great, like it's critical, but my view is that if you cannot get that in the hands of your customers, it's useless. So we actually have invested, many of us actually come from a distribution, sales, and marketing background, and this is actually one area we've invested a lot of time, money, and resources in. We actually have an in-house distribution team, experts in SEO, SEM, so Google AdWords, Facebook ads, where we actually work with the portfolio companies to actually help them drive down their customer acquisition costs. We're actually looking to do the same thing on the B2B side. How do you build a scalable sales process? If you're selling to enterprise, how do you think about strategy, about getting customers? And that's also part of the reason we've done the next thing, which is focusing a lot on the community and education. We have lots and lots of conferences. So we did a conference recently, just 2 months ago, in Commerceism. We like e-commerce. So we get all the best speakers to come to our conference, and actually all the best companies where we actually exchange a lot of information. So we spend a lot of time in communications, in community education. And when we talk about like 500 strong, that's a hashtag. We mean it. When we fund you, or you come through the accelerator program, you become part of the 500 family, and that becomes part of the larger network. So we have, for example, for mentors, we have close to 260 mentors actually in our network. So these are all people who work at Google or YouTube or Yahoo, or people who are UX experts, ex-founders of entrepreneurs, and these are people who actually contribute and give back to our community. We work with a lot of the platforms, and also the other big piece is we actually spend a lot of time doing doing events. And so we have another event, for example, in June in San Francisco, which is called Pre-Money, which is a future of venture capital. We did one last year to high acclaim, and we get like great speakers like Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz and Brad Feld, and you go down the list of Keith Rabois, Vino Costa. We have always good speakers who just talk a lot about what's going on in the VC world, and we learn a lot of stuff doing this. And so at the end of the day, the big part of, and this is just my preamble, is like Dave talks a lot about this, is like the whole point is like finding investors who have a clue about the product and service they invest in, who use the products, and maybe even write and speak about them. And why this is actually really important is because at the end of the day, and maybe this is just a Valley thing, but we always know that every year there's probably 12 to 15 really hot deals. And if we do all these things very, very well, we will not have a problem getting invited to actually join these deals. And so we know that out of these 12 to 15 deals, these are the deals that actually you make a lot of money. So for example, Twilio, we love Twilio. That's actually one of our investments. We've invested in companies like MakerBot. We've invested in companies like Wildfire, those acquired by Google. We've invested in companies, and there's tons of other really, really cool companies like Simple that was acquired by BBVA. We've had about 40 exits actually in the first 1 or 2 funds. So we seem to be doing pretty well. And I think that's one of the things that you need to think about is that as startup founders is that you need to look for more than just money, right? Money you can pretty much get, it's still hard, but it's money's money. What you have to figure out is that can these people actually add value? Do they understand my business? Can they actually help me? Do they have a network? And these are huge things because, and be very, very careful about not just taking money from anybody, because I've seen a lot of very, very good companies actually go downhill because they took money from the wrong investor. And so this is something as a startup founder is you really need to think about. You need to think about this as getting married. It's literally the same relationship that you should have with your investor. It's about getting married. So make sure you find the right one who really you complement one another. So I think that's basically it. So I tried to keep it fast and give you a quick overview, so hopefully I can answer any questions and such. Right.
Great stuff. Let's have 3 questions. Well, 2 questions maybe because we are short on time.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Try to get you guys on back on track.
Yeah, sure. It's very interesting because you guys know that in Bulgaria there are 2 accelerator/seed funds now, and Marvin has already been there, done it. So you can tell him more.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi. Yeah. Hi. Nice to see you again. You know, we are family. So
we are family. 500 family. 500 family.
Yeah, just like a little story, for instance, like how committed 500 Startup and Dave was. He actually did like a very annoying hack with a media journalist, and he basically just like blocked his phone because he got like so many text messages. But that's how Twilio got attention. It was like a little bit of a hack. It was really big in the good old days. But like Dave is like that kind of cool dude who said like, okay, let's disrupt, for real. Anyway, my question is, you were touching on the point with female in technology. Mm-hmm. Of course, I'm female in technology, so I'm really interested in that. The questions I always get and I try to answer it is how do you get more women in technology? Like how do you, when you have like, for instance, co-founders coming in and they say, okay, we want to do like a fashion e-commerce platform, mm-hmm. and there are no women in the team. Like how do you train them or prepare them for getting a woman on board? Because that in the end of the day will be the key of success for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. The question was ask yourself, and I ask startups, like, okay, at the end of the day, like, what's the insight or what's the secret you actually have to do this well? I mean, there have been some exceptions. So I for example, there's Zulily, right? Like, not one of our companies, but like the founders, they're guys, right? So, and they're doing like children's sort of products, but they just actually spent a lot of time doing homework on it, so like they can still talk authoritatively. But it is helpful. My view is just like that's always the first question. Like, so you're doing women's fashion and you're a guy. Like, why are you doing this? Like, what's the point? Like, do you have any, like, instead of just asking your wife, like, what's your edge here? And I probably wouldn't invest in them, generally speaking, because they don't have an edge, in my opinion. And we invest in a lot of female founders. I've made about 12 investments now. 6 of them are actually female founders.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see your colleagues on the 6th of June in Berlin, because there is like the female-only European demo day with 500 startups. So that's going to be interesting. Good. So you will have another 10 of those on your portfolio.
Good. I know, looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Cool. Any more questions?
Hey, when you're dealing with such a large quantity of companies, how do you manage to keep a personal attitude to each one? How do you balance that?
What do you mean personal? Sorry, I'm just trying to...
Well, I mean, you've got hundreds of companies coming in. How do you pay attention to each one and give them the attitude that you're talking about?
That's a great question. I mean, so each of us actually have our portfolio that we manage, right? So every company that I invest in, I actually am the point of contact. So like I said, done 11 or 12. This should be clearing now soon, but I've done about 11 or 12. So I'm their main point of contact. But the whole point of actually the community is how we scale this is when you have a very, very tight community of actually founders and mentors, is that's actually how you scale. You actually rely on the overall community to help them with specific questions. So we have this thing called dashboard.io in the back end where they can ask questions to the community. They can actually find specific mentors, or if they can't find them, they ping us, right? So it's kind of a combination of the community as well as you sort of helping out. Yeah.
Let's do last one. If there is one.
If there is one.
Hello?
That's
Quiet
my
today.
question then. My question.
Can I ask?
Sorry,
I
sometimes
ask?
don't see, so if there is a question, please
I'm
do.
here, yes.
Yeah,
Understand. Well,
just a bit dark.
I'll take two questions. All right, go ahead, please.
okay. I'm interested to know if there are also, let's call them senior entrepreneurs, let's say age of 50 and above. Do you have those kind of people coming forward with startups?
I mean, we see all kinds. I mean, the oldest one I've invested is probably like in their 40s. They tend to be more on the B2B side, right? Because I think it's very, very hard to sell and disrupt enterprise if you've never worked at a job or worked at enterprise before. But yeah, definitely.
And there was another one. Last one, please. Go.
Yeah. Hi, thank you. That was a great presentation. I'm curious to find out if you already have made investments in the region in Eastern Europe.
So we have a bunch of investments in Estonia. We have 2 in Turkey. Not in this region, not yet. I'd like to change that.
Romanian.
Yeah, yeah, we had one in Romania. That was actually one of the first in Fund 1.
Yeah.
But they're actually more London. It's actually more London.
Croatian as well.
Yeah, Farmeron. And we have a bunch in Germany as well, too. But we're always looking for new interesting companies.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks,
All right,
Marvin.
great. Thank you very much, you guys.